I'd like to talk to you about copying and pasting from Illustrator to Photoshop. As you can see here, I have a vector logo in Illustrator. I'd like to move it over to Photoshop. The idea is always to preserve as much editability as possible. So what we're going to do is start by saying select all in Illustrator, saying edit copy, and then I'm going to go ahead and move over to Photoshop. If I go to the edit menu and paste, these are the four options that I want to talk to you about. The first is Smart Object. If I say OK, the logo shows up this way with a bounding box on it, which gives me the option to scale it as much as I want non-destructively. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on the keyboard to accept this, and you can see that it created a new layer in the layers palette called Vector Smart Object, and on the icon for the layer there's a smaller icon that shows a document that says that it is a smart object. So the beauty of this is that this is totally editable and scalable, and there's a dependency on the original file. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is double click on the icon in the layers palette, and this dialog shows up giving me instructions on what to do that I have to go ahead and save in the other document. So I'm actually going to say don't show again because this is actually quite annoying, and I'm going to click OK. And then what happens is that Illustrator opens with a version of my logo in it. I'm just going to place this window here and zoom in. A version of my logo that is not the original one. Look, it's called Vector Smart Object 1. And if I Apple click on this, this is where it's sitting buried in the operating system somewhere at the root of the hard drive. So it keeps some temporary version of the file. So I'm going to go ahead and say select all and change the color of it. So now my logo is red. And what that dialog said is that I needed to save that dialog that came up earlier that I said to not show again. So now if I go back to Photoshop, look at that. It updated to red in Photoshop. And the beauty of this is that since this file was originally vector in Illustrator, at any point I can do a Command T, which is transform, and scale this up, and do Command T again and scale it down, and do Command T again and scale it up, and so on. And it's non-destructive. So this is actual vector data. You see it as pixels here, but it's actually going to remain clear for you no matter what size it's at in Photoshop. So that was the first version. So I'm going to go ahead and click the visibility of this layer and say paste again and choose pixels. This is the most straightforward one probably. I'm going to click OK, and again I get a bounding box. Right now this logo is still vector, so I can scale it at this point non-destructively, but once I hit enter on the keyboard, we're done scaling. If I scale it again, it's going to get distorted. So this is at the native resolution of the file that I'm in. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out here, and so that's option number 2. This layer is pixels. I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to do paste yet again. So you can see that they've accumulated layers. Every time I paste, it creates a new layer. The next option is a path. So that creates a Photoshop path. It doesn't affect the layers palette at all. It's stored in the paths palette as a work path. So again, if I save this document right now and close it and reopen it, that path will be there. This is a convenient way to draw a clipping path on an image in Illustrator and copy and paste it into Photoshop for more accuracy, because the pen tool in Illustrator tends to be a bit easier to use, and you have more drawing tools in Illustrator to create a really nice path that could lead to a clipping path from Illustrator. Then you just copy and paste it in Photoshop. You have a work path and you go on to create a clipping path. So that's option number 3. I'm just going to click off of that path so that it doesn't show anymore. Go back to my layers palette, and for the last time do Apple V for paste and select shape layer. This personally is my favorite. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and you can see that it created a new layer called shape 1. It's a shape layer. So this is beautiful. This is vector data in Photoshop. So it's the same thing as the path that's in the paths palette. In fact, you can see there that it shows this vector mask in the paths palette. So that's vector data. And the icon to the left in the layers palette dictates the color that it is. So this is really, really editable. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the black swatch here, and I get my color picker, and I can choose any color I want. So I'm going to go to the brightest red and click OK, and there we go, it's red. So I can double click on that yet again and change it to any color, and do that repeatedly and non-destructively. Okay, so this is my favorite, and I can also do a Command T with this, which is transform again, and scale this up and down, and it doesn't make any difference. And this is perfectly sharp vector data in Photoshop, and there's no dependency on any other file. So this is the most flexible way. So that's a quick rundown on how to copy and paste from Illustrator to Photoshop and preserve editability as much as possible.